Welcome everyone. On this week's episode of Humble History, we will cover the Haitian Revolution, where we will see the largest slave uprising in the transatlantic slave trade and arguably the most successful slave revolution in history. Let's go. What we today call Haiti is the western part of a Caribbean island called Hispaniola. At the time of the revolution, in 1791, both sides of Hispaniola were European colonies. The eastern side was controlled by Spain, it was called Santo Domingo, and the western side was controlled by France, and they called it Saint-Domingue, what later became Haiti. Although the two colonies had similar names, they were very different in the amount of profit they generated. Saint-Domingue was the most profitable slave colony in the world, and one of the most profitable colonies, period. To put that in perspective, this small section of a small island was making more money for France than India would go on to make for England. Saint-Domingue was also one of the harshest slave colonies in the transatlantic slave trade. Slaves on the island died frequently from being overworked, brutalized, and murdered by plantation owners, as well as from tropical diseases such as yellow fever. This resulted in constant replacement of enslaved people from the African coasts. So even though slavery had existed on Saint-Domingue for centuries, in 1791, 2/3 of the slaves on the colony were Africans, and only 1/3 were slaves born on the island. The enslaved people made up the majority on the island and outnumbered the white French population by 10-1. The white population on the island are divided in two groups. There are the Grand Blancs, or the big whites, and there are the Petite Blancs, or the small whites. So the Grand Blancs are the plantation owners, and they are the wealthy ones on the island, while the small whites are the artisans and the workers and the overseers of plantations who are working on the island. The third segment of Saint-Domingue population with the free people of color. These are the children of the white population on the island and black population on the island. And although the free people of color, as their name suggests, were free, and some even accumulated wealth, they still faced legal discrimination constantly from the white French population. The fate of all four of these groups depends on the will of the French government. But in 1789, something happens that shakes up the French government. It's the French Revolution. In France, we see massive upheavals of social, political, and economic orders and a shake-up in French society in general. On seeing this, the inhabitants of Saint-Domingue all want something for themselves out of the French Revolution. The big whites want more control of the island and less interference from mainland France. The small whites, who believe that they are being mistreated and not being compensated enough, want more compensations, and some even want independence from France. The free people of color want their full rights as French citizens, and the enslaved people on the island want liberty and freedom. It's from this want that in 1791 we see the beginning of massive slave revolts. Thus, the Haitian Revolution begins. One of the most important leaders of the Haitian Revolution was a man named Toussaint Louverture. Toussaint was a slave born on Saint-Domingue who quickly became an effective military leader at the beginning of the revolution. Toussaint was able to mold the slave revolt into a competent and successful rebel army. When the rebel armies began to overwhelm the colonists, France sent reinforcements to Saint-Domingue. But at this point, they were no longer the only European powers involved. Both Spain and England had sent military forces to Saint-Domingue, wanting to claim a piece of the most profitable colony for themselves. The Spanish even offered arms and support to the rebel army if they joined their cause, and they were able to get people like Toussaint to fight for Spain. At this point, France realizes that it cannot fight off the English, the Spanish, and the slave rebellion. So in 1795, the French government abolishes slavery, rejoin France and fight off English and the Spanish forces from Saint-Domingue and begin their lives as free French citizens. Toussaint's power only continues to rise after emancipation. First, he becomes the commander-in-chief of the Saint-Domingue military, and soon he accumulates enough power that he declared himself governor for life. Now you might be thinking, okay, this is where Toussaint has enough power that he expels the French, declares Saint-Domingue independent, completely gets rid of the plantation system, and everybody lives happily ever after. But no, Toussaint has the opposite policies in mind. 1. Toussaint continues relation with France and believes that Saint-Domingue's future could only continue with a continued dependence on France to a certain degree. Second, Toussaint adamantly continues the plantation system, as he believes that sugar is crucial to Saint-Domingue's economy. He did this with some major alterations. One, he gave Saint-Domingue its own constitution separate from France that gave it certain autonomy in its own actions. And secondly, everyone working on the plantations were now being compensated. But regardless of these changes, these policies made Toussaint lose popularity with the black population on the island. But in Toussaint's defense, his policies did work for a time. The island continued to prosper through the use of plantation, and even though there was reliance on France, the real power lied in Toussaint and his black generals, who were all former slaves. Everything seemed to go according to plan. Until something unexpected happened. Something unforeseeable to Toussaint. And it did not happen in Saint-Domingue, it happened in France. Napoleon Bonaparte comes to power. Napoleon's rise to power undoes most of the successes of the French Revolution. He creates a military dictatorship and eventually goes on to declare himself Emperor of France. Then he wants to undo any success of the Haitian Revolution, mainly by reinstating slavery. Napoleon has big plans in mind. He's planning to take over most of Europe and then turn to North America and grow France's colonies there. For both of these plans, we need money. And where is a good place to get money? The most profitable colony in the world seems like a good place to get money. And how do you make Saint-Domingue the most profitable colony in the world again? You reinstate slavery. So Napoleon sends his brother-in-law, a man named General Leclerc, to Saint-Domingue with the orders to declare special laws on the island. The black population of Saint-Domingue quickly reads the writing on the wall and realizes that the special laws are a precursor to reinstating slavery. Many of the black population fight against Leclerc's men, and there are insurrections all over the colony. Something very important to note here is this is where Toussaint's decline begins. Even though Toussaint realizes that the special laws are a way to reinstate slavery, he still does not fight in the insurrections. He continues to try to find a win-win situation for Saint-Domingue and France, because Toussaint still believes that Saint-Domingue needs France in order to survive. But others are not willing to take that chance, and one of the most prominent figures not willing to take that chance is Toussaint's right-hand man, Jean-Jacques Dessalines. Dessalines, like Toussaint, was a former slave in Saint-Domingue, and is just as an effective, if not better general than Toussaint. Even though he is not as charismatic, his popularity rises among the black population because he is clearly willing to fight off the French while Toussaint is still vacillating. The insurrection continues and grows to the point where Leclerc fails his mission and removes the special laws. But now faith in Toussaint's leadership has been lost among the black population. Lost even by his right-hand man Dessalines, who works with Leclerc to have Toussaint arrested and sent to France. As Toussaint is shipped to France, he gives the famous lines, quote, "In overthrowing me, you have done no more than cut down the trunk of the tree of black liberty in Saint-Domingue. It will spring up back from the roots, for they are numerous and deep." End quote. Toussaint later dies in his cell in France. Back in Saint-Domingue, General Leclerc dies of yellow fever and is replaced by the much worse Rochambeau. Rochambeau massacred many blacks and people of color indiscriminately in cruel ways, including burying them alive and boiling them in molasses. Dessalines was willing to return Rochambeau's favors in kind, and this is the most brutal part of the Haitian Revolution. The historian C.L.R. James writes, "We cannot describe that war in detail. It was a war not so much of armies as of the people. It was now a war with the racial divisions emphasizing the class struggle. Blacks and mulattoes against whites. Leclerc had proposed a war of extermination, and Rochambeau waged it." End quote. After several gruesome battles that ended in Dessalines' victory, Rochambeau capitulates and flees Saint-Domingue. Dessalines declares Saint-Domingue independent, and he makes himself emperor of this new country. Dessalines renames Saint-Domingue to Haiti, which is the name the native inhabitants had called the island, and thus concludes the Haitian Revolution. The Haitian Revolution served as a beacon for other slave insurrections in the Caribbean and the Americas, and it also stands out in the revolutions of the 18th century by being the only one that declares that no one should be slaves. It shaped future ideas of what a free society means. But I want to end this video with some questions regarding Toussaint's and Dessalines' respective approach to liberty. Toussaint, who was by no means a pacifist, used diplomacy and tried to find a win-win situation as much as he could, and in a way strived for the most ideal of possibilities. But he nonetheless failed to finish the revolution and guarantee freedom. Could he have succeeded if he was given more time? Or did Toussaint's idealism separate him from reality? On the other hand, Dessalines was able to succeed, but he used incredibly violent means to do so. Did Dessalines become the monster he was fighting against, or were these means necessary? There are no definitive answers to these questions, but I still think they are worth asking, and I would love to hear your answers. Please leave your comments at the bottom of this video and tell me what you think. And I will see you on the next episode.